Going here. My name is Cartlon Sears, and I'm a coach with the Harwood Institute for Public Innovation. And I'm happy you joined us today. Let me sort of gather my thoughts here from that brief interruption. But so I asked you if you would just think about that quote on the screen from Rich and think a little bit about just how you're doing yourself and being more turned outward. And we can move on to the next slide. Today, we're going to be doing a webinar on libraries and authentic community engagement, which is a lot about what the Institute's work is. And what we're going to be doing today in today's webinar, we'll be hearing from 4 librarians, and you can move on to the next slide. We'll be hearing from 4 librarians that made the choice to be more turned outward and engage their communities in an authentic way. The Harwood Institute is a 30-year-old nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that teaches, coaches, and inspires individuals and organizations to solve pressing problems and to change how communities work together to get things done. For about the past decade, the Institute has trained and coached more than 4,000 librarians, professionals from across North America, to deepen the impact and relevance that they have in the work that they're doing in their community. And today, we're really privileged to be able to hear from 4 of them. Each in their own way decided to pursue a different path towards making community a common enterprise again. We can move on to the next slide. In today's presentation, they'll be exploring these 4 questions that you see on the screen. And what I'd like you to encourage you to listen to as each of these individuals shares what they have. Think about this as a lens of learning about what authentically engaging the community actually looks like. You know, what authentically engaging the community produces and the choices that they've had to make that allowed their good work to happen. So let me just repeat that. Listen to what authentically engaging the community looks like, what that produces, and especially the choices that they've had to make that allowed their good work to happen. We'll leave time for questions following each librarian sharing. And if you have a question, what I'd ask you to do is just type it in the chat box. We have a lot of participants today. And what I'll do is I'll try to watch what's going on in chat and theme as best I can the questions that you have so we can cover as many as possible. And then after each of the 4 have spoken, we're going to be having a roundtable discussion on a couple of questions that further explores what it takes to authentically engage the community. And then we'll close with some opportunities that you have for pursuing this path forward. So with that, what I'd like to do is move on and introduce Amanda McLaren to you. I was privileged to get to know Amanda when I was doing some coaching work in Michigan, and I'll just let Amanda speak for herself now.
Thanks, Carlton. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and speaking with all of you today. I'm the director of the Benzonia Public Library in beautiful northern Michigan, so kind of up here near Pinky. It is snowing today, which is exciting, and I'm just really excited to be here. A little nervous too, so please cut me some slack. So Benzonia Public Library is located in Benzie County, which is the smallest county in Michigan. We have 1 stoplight, and we were actually the last county to get a stoplight. So yeah, it's small. It also is my hometown. So I'm very grateful to serve my community. It can be both a blessing and a curse, but it's always a privilege. So that's just a little bit about where we are. So when I first started working here at the library 4 years ago, as the director, I wanted to, well, let me see, I don't really know how to put this. I envisioned a community hub. I envisioned a place where families would go, where everybody was comfortable to come and be together. I could see people coming in and out of the door. The reality is that's not really what was happening. They were working towards that, but this library is 93 years old. Not a lot had changed in that time. We were working towards renovation, which made a big difference, but how do you get the word out? How do you let people know this isn't your grandma's library? This is a whole new world here. And so that was my goal, to let people know and to see what we could do for the community, you know, with that whole idea of bring them in. Also, how do we get out there and how do we do whatever we can do? And that's a tough question. I don't know if I know the answer still. So when I first heard about Harwood, I was really excited. It was kind of basically a map on how to do that, you know, on how to ask the questions and what to do with those answers. And when I first went to training, you know, there's a lot of information and I was a little scared going into it, to be honest. And when I got home, we started renovations right away. So it was 6 months before I had my first community conversation. And I thought, I'm not going to remember anything. It's going to be too difficult. And, you know, I was very worried. And I received some coaching. Cartlon, who you saw earlier, was just so instrumental in helping me get started. And David Vada, who's part of one of our MCLS group. But anyway, sorry. So we got started, and our most productive conversation was during a time that there was a lot of change in our community. One of the local elementary schools was closing, and there was a lot of emotion that went with that. And the night of this particular conversation was actually the night that they were having the Honor the Knights event for the closing of the school. So it wasn't a big surprise when the community conversation really focused on concern for the children in the area, for our kids. And so as the conversation progressed, and we were very blessed in that actually the school superintendent was at the conversation as well, and other key community members. And as it progressed, and the question was, what can we do? How can we be there for these kids? You know, at most schools, and at ours in particular, there are things in place to catch the real at-risk kids. But for those kids that are kind of in the middle, they're sort of slipping through the cracks. They are feeling like they're not seen and that they're not heard. And that was a real problem. And we, in this area, unfortunately, we have a very high suicide rate, very high overdose. So that's scary. And it really, it led to some hard conversations, but some amazing results. So what we discussed was forming a mentor program at the elementary level. And so this conversation was in May. And by September, we had everything in place to start that. We had met with the school principal, and as I said, the superintendent was already on board, so that was kind of easy. But she was amazing and instrumental in getting things organized and reaching out to the teachers. And so what would happen is the teachers would recommend students that they felt could benefit from this. Not all teachers signed on at first. I think they were afraid this was going to lead to more work for them, which nobody wants to see. But those that did sign on were very pleased with the results. So we ended up with about half the teachers signing up. We ended up doing a call to community members that would be willing to come in and be these mentors. We had 20 mentors step up. We had 20 people in the community step up and say, I want to help. They would meet one-on-one at the school with these kids for about half an hour, once or twice a week. Some of them have even started with helping out with reading, things like that, which is amazing and just kind of a bonus. So they're meeting one-on-one with these kids, forming these relationships, really letting them know that there are people out in the community that care for them. And it's been wildly successful. My favorite story from last year was, in particular, they do like this, they call it Character Cafe, and it's bringing, it's rewarding children for good behavior. So one of the kids that one of our mentees had actually been recognized for being respectful. And so they do this little, they bring everybody together, they have snacks, the parents are invited, the kids are given this certificate, and they do a photo. This particular one, this child's parents couldn't be there, and his mentor was, so he wasn't alone. When it was time to go up and do the photo with the parent, the mentor went up with him and they got the photo, and it was just this beautiful moment. And I was lucky enough to be there, and it just was this impactful, like, this is what it's for. It was so amazing. So I'm grateful. And we've had so many moments like that. It's really exciting. This year, all the teachers in the school have signed up, and so it is really growing and expanding. In addition to that, the middle school is creating a mentoring program based on our model that they will be launching in just a few weeks. So that's exciting as well. I just want to say that it's powerful and exciting to know that there are so many lives impacted from just one conversation, you know, from a small group of people sitting around a table. So it's the kids, it's the mentors. We meet frequently just to kind of talk about their experiences and to hear from them and really what they're taking from this. It's wonderful. For the parents that see the community investing in their children, it's been huge and exciting, and I'm just so incredibly grateful to be part of it. So that's pretty much the story of our most successful conversation. So I don't know where to go from there. I think Carlton's popping back in here.
Yeah, I am.
Hi.
So thanks very much. So what I'm going to have to do here is ask for some assistance from the Harwood staff, because somehow I've lost my webinar chat and I can't see what questions are being asked.
Hi, Carlton, it's Habiba. Why don't I monitor the chat and then see if there are any questions that I can share with everyone? Okay, so thank you, Amanda. That was a great presentation. We're going to go ahead and see the chat box here if there are any questions.
You see any questions in chat?
Nope, no questions yet.
Okay, so I just have one thing I wanted to ask Amanda. And if you think back to just how you got started and what were some of your initial choices you had to make about how you were going to move along being turned outward, I mean, in a really practical way.
So what was your question exactly?
Yeah, it's when you first got started, you came back from training. What were some of the initial really practical things you had to do that were different? What were some different choices?
Well, I mean, I guess the most practical thing is listening. So I think that what goes along with me saying that it's kind of sometimes a curse to be serving your own community. I think I know everything. I think I know what everybody wants because these are people that I've spent my entire life with, and that's just not the case. I don't know what everybody wants or needs, and so so that's been the most practical thing. You know, we ask a lot more questions, and we try to say yes to whatever we can.
But you're just asking a lot more questions as opposed to making assumptions?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are library staff involved in the mentorship program?
So they're not involved in the mentoring program. However, I will say this, library staff and the board are 100% behind any type of community engagement. And we do things beyond just the mentoring program. We do behavior incentive days here for the school where kids are rewarded for good behavior. We do enrichment days at the school. I mean, we're very, very involved with the school, and the staff get involved with all of that. And, you know, we have a small budget, so everything that they do outside of their regular hours at the desk is all volunteer. So it's pretty incredible to have their commitment as well.
Great. Let me just look and see if there's any other questions here.
So we have a few questions that have come up, actually. The first one, Amanda, how many children were mentored?
You know, that's a good question. I want to say, I was trying to look at this email that has everything on there, but I can't read it. I want to say that the first year we had about 20. We had about 20 kids. And the mentors, some mentors were mentoring more than one. We are in a resort town, so some people do leave partway through the year, and there's an understanding of that, and they keep in touch by a letter, so they become pen pals in a way. I want to say about 20 kids.
Okay, great. And they've asked if there was a vetting process for mentors who participated in the program.
So what we did, the way we got started initially was we had several informational meetings here at the library where we talked about what it would look like. You know, we wanted them to know that they would be supported 100% in what they were doing. And, you know, we talked about the one-on-one time, and it wasn't ever meant to be a tutoring program. It's really meant to be a connection between these mentors and the children. The school pays for the, I don't remember what it's called, but it's, you know, it's the criminal, they check criminal history, everything like that. And I'll tell you, most of the mentors that we have are retired teachers, you know, things like that. But that's pretty much it. We have them fill out a form of who they would like to mentor, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, I see one more question here. My questions have started to pop up. And that's just, you talked about the age of your library and how you've reached out to adults, and especially the people who view the library as their grandmother's libraries. Yeah. And what about the people that don't want to change?
Yeah. So when I first started here and I talked about getting a preschool reading program going, I was kind of met with the response, well, that'd be nice. Maybe you could do that on the porch. So it was, at first, there was a little bit of resistance, but I will be completely honest, they've been won over. I mean, they have seen the change. They have seen what is happening here, and we have not received complaints. I mean, people are excited, even the ones that, you know, we had one woman in particular that was always very, very quiet. And whenever she would speak to me, I was like, gosh, I have no idea if I think she hates me. And she just recently was one of the most outspoken in talking about the library and the changes and how grateful she is, and just how much she loves seeing the library full of people. And so it's really been, we've not met with a lot of negativity, and that's lucky. I know that that's not the norm, but it's been great.
Well, that's great, Amanda. Thanks very much.
You're
and
welcome.
We're going to move on to the Amber Williams out in Spokane, and have her share a little bit about the work that she's been doing.
All right. Good morning. Habibit, would you please move it to the next slide? So I'm in Spokane County, and because my state isn't shaped like a hand, I've got a map to show you. We are on the absolute east side bordering Idaho, and I work for the county library. So just to keep things really straightforward, Spokane County's biggest city is called Spokane, and the city of Spokane has their own library system, and we are the library system that surrounds the city, with one other dot, Liberty Lake, who's their own library. But we have 11 locations, and I primarily work on the north side of the county that borders 2 other counties and a different state. So slightly different challenges in meeting the needs of a lot of people who aren't even necessarily our library users in regards to card holders. So my backstory is I met Cartlon in 2014. Spokane County Library District was one of the 10 libraries chosen to be part of the original American Library Association's Libraries Transforming Communities cohort. So being part of that cohort and going through the Harwood training was grant driven. We signed a paper saying we would. So we had to do all the things, and we had to do them on a timeline set by ALA and the Harwood Institute. So that while I went to training and then I came back and I thought about what I might want to do, we really had to get on the ball. And that first round in 2014 to 2015, over the course of about 8 months, we hosted in our, at that time, 10 locations, 76 community conversations. And from these community conversations, we used the information and what we heard from our community to inform our strategic plan, which we actually called the Community Engagement Plan, and it was 2016 to 2018, so a 3-year community engagement plan. And so in thinking about Carlton's questions, really that idea of turning outward for me, and I would say for my organization, has been a cultural shift around the idea that engagement is different than advocacy. And so often we're still using the word engagement when we should be saying advocacy. We actually asked what people wanted most in their community, and then we responded to it, as opposed to, again, guessing at what they want, assuming with what they want, telling them what they want. And when we started, one of our first projects actually from what we heard and what we observed, and that sort of match of that sweet spot, let me use the Harwood term for it, even between our public knowledge and our expert knowledge as being community members and active, we revitalized a park. Habiba, will you move to the next slide, please? So in September of 2015, the library that I primarily work at is the Deer Park Library. And we have this beautiful building with these gorgeous windows that look out on this green space that was and is a city park. And it had just kind of fallen to trash and abuse and misuse. And we rallied the city and its people around cleaning it. And in September, we hosted the first, what is now an annual, so the inaugural park cleanup. And how we managed to do it was by partnering with a Eagle Scout candidate. And we said, well, we'll take on, making it city property. So we'll take on that side of it, getting the city behind this idea. If you'll take on, raising some of the money and rallying volunteers. And it was about a 6-month process, because we heard in our community conversations, people wanted a beautiful city, beautification. It was a big deal. And this was something that, was that kind of perfect place to start. And so surprised that day in September, 115 people showed up to clean this 2-acre park parcel. We took out more than 150 bags of debris. And, some of it, of course, is just down pine needles that had been blocking all of the, clearing the paths. And Habib, will you move to the next slide, please? This is the after. I mean, it's lovely. It's a very natural space. And it has been such a pleasant experience. The city has rallied behind it so much. And if you'll move to the next one, they actually renamed the park. Oh, I guess that comes later. I think my slides are a little out of order. It's okay. Anyways, the city named the park the Library Park, and the Deer Park community host their own annual cleanup at this point. We are invited to participate and no longer invited to lead the charge. It's been a great success in this idea of, we heard what you wanted, and we found a common thing to start from that we could all rally around. And it was an immediate success. And it was something that we all felt good about. And there we are. We were able to build off of that. And it's just that relationship of, you know, who gets things done? The library does. Yeah. So this was part of the fundraising efforts we paid for through fundraising both by the Boy Scout and through our friends of the library and a local hospital. And we had these signs put up. And you can see them, that the library is there in the corner, and that's the green space of the park behind it. And one of the other things that we heard a lot about in Deer Park was food scarcity. And this is one of those like Band-Aid kind of things where let's do a food drive and feed people for a week. Or what can we do that actually has more impact? And we became a CACFP, a child and adult care food program, after school snack site. And Habiba, now if you'll find that slide with the kids in it with a cart, that is the slide with this. Yeah. Yes. So we, after school, we're a whopping 3 blocks from the local elementary school, and there are no after-school programs anywhere in the city of Deer Park. So kids come to the library, and they stay there until their parents pick them up much later in the evening sometimes. I'm sure that this sounds like a very familiar thing to a lot of people. And we were having issues with just, you know, petty disturbances. Kids they need something to do to keep them going. And, you know, the computers are full. We've got games out. We've got Legos out. We've increased programming. So there's something to keep their hands busy. But when you're hearing about food scarcity, and the quote I always share was from a parent who said, "I'm not worried about homework when I'm trying to put food on the table." So in March of 2016, we started the snack program and partnered with that school 3 blocks away, who had some extra funding to pay for tutoring. And teachers actually came to the library, and there were like 80 kids in this program, and they would get snack from us, they would browse for books, and then they would be tutored by the teaching staff. Unfortunately, funding only lasted through this school year of 2016 for tutoring, but because the CACFP is a federal program, we're still doing it at the library. And actually, what are we at? 2.5 years. And last month, we just passed 15,000 snacks. So we have handed out more than 15,000 snacks in 2.5 years to kids, just between the hours of 3 and 4 p.m., Monday through Friday, when the library is open. Habiba, will you move to the next slide? Hopefully it's the next slide. Yes. So some other things that we did to, you know, not just come up with a Band-Aid fix, but to sort of just raise awareness about the resources we have, is we put out a produce swap table. And we are not the first library to come up with this, but this is one of the easiest things I think we've ever done. It is literally a table with that checkered tablecloth and a sign with very deliberate language that explains that everything on this table is given freely. It's not for barter or trade, and people do bring in their extra garden supplies. Like, how many zucchinis does any one person really need? And people take from it. And on the left side, that is a picture of one of the other partnerships we did. We did enrichment activities at free lunch sites. Recognizing where kids were in the summer is where the food was. And we brought stuff to them to do. And where this all comes back to is, instead of guessing what our community wanted, we asked the questions, and then we responded authentically. And I can say here we are at this, wrapping up another, strategic planning process, and that we have moved the needle and actually had impact in this area. So with our community engagement plan wrapping up this year, these last 6 months have been spent writing the next one and using the same kinds of tools with community conversations and asking what community's aspirations are and what are the issues and the barriers to the success. And in the Deer Park area where food scarcity was such a big thing in 2014 and 2015, it didn't come up at all this time. And it doesn't mean we need to stop doing what we're doing, but it does feel like we did things right. As a organization, we have very much shifted culture to recognize the difference between engagement and advocacy. And it's become just, you write a strategic plan, you've got your mission, you've got your visions, your core services, your guiding principles, and your community responsive. Like, what do they actually want that we can be part of? Carlton, that wraps me up.
Okay, so I have a question for you. You talk about changing culture, and there was a question in the Q&A
in the
box around, what does it take to get more staff and trustees on board with doing work in this way? Because, yeah, you can see that you've changed culture, but
how do you actually do it?
How do you do that?
All right, so I'm a mid-sized library, though some would call us a large. We have 174 employees, again, 11 locations. And when we started, we were a team of 5 people, and it was made up of our director, our deputy director, and myself and another librarian. And we were very much, we were out on the desk, we were out in the library, we were champions of the change. And from the 5 of us, our 5th person, by the way, was a former board of trustee member, and so she was a community member at that point. And it fell to the librarians, the 2 of us, to bring the other librarians on board. And by training them to use these tools and expanded our team to include managers, it just became integrated in how we did things day to day. But it took that shift. And in 2014, we had some retirements from librarians who didn't want to make this kind of shift. And that was okay, because it really has been the right thing to do. And what our deputy director at the time, he's actually now our director, Patrick Rowe, used to always say is, this is the direction the library is going, and it's like a bus, and there's room for everybody on the bus. But we really are going to go to this new way of doing things. And this is the timeline in which it's going to happen. And this is, plenty of time for everybody to get on the bus. Everybody is welcome to come. And you just have to recognize that maybe not everybody will come with you when you go and make these changes.
Great. Thanks very much. One more quick question, and then we'll move on to Nancy, Kim, Phillips, and Skokie. And was there any concern about sharing of food items? Is there any kind of disclaimer that maybe, we don't want to be responsible for somebody getting sick or something?
Are we talking about produce swap?
Yeah, I think
Can I
so,
assume
yes.
that's what, or
yeah, I
or
believe
snacks?
so.
Okay, so produce swap, I can admit I was the complete Debbie Downer on that. I said, no way, we can't do that. That's a liability. I was wrong. Apparently it isn't. And there's precedent set. And because it is it would be the same thing like a lending library, right? You give away books. What if the book had something in it? It's freely given or taken, and it's a choice that somebody makes to take it or leave it. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. And good to hear your good work, Amber. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Carlton.
Yeah, and now we're going to move on to Nancy Kim Phillips from the Skokie Public Library and hear about some of the really interesting work that they're up to.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm trying to click on the video. Okay, here we go. Hello. So I am the community. Can you hear me, Carlton?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
You're
great.
good.
Okay, thank you. I don't know about all of you, but I am really enjoying the stories from Amanda and Amber, and am happy to be here this morning with you. I'm the community engagement manager at the Skokie Public Library. I've been here for about a year. And prior to joining librarianship, I've had experience in nonprofit organizations and also in consulting around community development and strategic planning and collaboration. So I brought that to my work as a librarian. And I'm ready for the next slide. But even going back before that, I thought I'd just share a little bit more of my background. I'm also from a very small town in central Illinois. And up until about 7th grade, my family was we really represented the only racial diversity in the community. And maybe some of you are in communities like that as well. I'm a PK, I'm a preacher's kid. And I think people often wonder what ministers do from Monday through Saturday. When I was growing up, my dad would make daily rounds to the barber shop, the coffee shop, the grocery store, the bank, the school, and is pictured here, the over 55 club. I thought that he was just hanging out, and I suspect a lot of people did. But years later in my professional work, I recognized that he was a master of community engagement. Beyond his own congregation, he was getting to know the community and really working hard to develop deep relationships that with people who, when we first moved there, may have seen him as other, but over time really embraced him and our family as their own. So that's the beginning, and we can go to the next slide. So fast forward several decades, and I'm at the Skokie Public Library. For those of you who may not be familiar with Skokie, if you look on the map, that big white area on the map is the city of Chicago, and the star there just north of the city is where Skokie is. Historically, we were the home to a large population of Holocaust survivors, and today we have a significant immigrant population and are a place where many refugees have found home as well. And we can go to the next slide. We created our community engagement department almost 5 years ago at the library. We've had a long history of being active in the community with our director, longtime director, really being at the helm of that. But we wanted to go deeper and really incorporate community engagement as one of our library core values. So about that time that we created the department, our director, deputy director, and then first community engagement manager attended a Harwood Innovators Lab. And that became a framework for our new group. So today, in addition to me, we have 5 full-time community engagement librarians and 2 part-time staff, one of whom is a librarian. And everyone has an area of focus for carrying out this mantra that you see on the screen. We also have a bookmobile with 5 staff who are part of our team. And there are so many examples of, over the past 5 years, how turning outward has changed our work. And I'm going to talk to you about one exciting initiative that we call Skokie Cares. And we can move to the next slide. Thank you. Long before we created community development as a department, we had a track record of relationships with many organizations in the community. But as we sought to understand what was important to the community, those relationships have grown and evolved. And so this picture is meant to show that, we have these kind of individual relationships with all these organizations and many, many more. But in early 2016, we also were starting a strategic planning process, and we convened a group of community leaders to talk about the community and its aspirations and challenges. And at the end of that conversation, the people around the table said, wow, it would really be great if we could continue to meet and talk, because it's possible that we could have a bigger impact if we were working together. So several months later, in October of 2016, the group reconvened and began a very preliminary conversation to just start to explore more what we were hearing and to think about where the overlaps were. And then the election of 2016 happened. And when the group reconvened at its second meeting in November, people were really concerned, especially about anti-immigrant rhetoric, and had heard a lot from residents and others and families who were afraid and concerned. So the group galvanized very quickly around wanting to send a strong message that affirmed values of diversity and welcome. And so you can turn this to the next slide. Yeah, Skokie welcomes everyone. A lawn sign campaign and Skokie Cares were born. So we had this sign campaign and buttons that you can, I don't know if you can see or not. And for the campaign, the library created the graphic design and as well as the website, because that was an asset that we had on our staff and that we could share. And even though we were responsible for that design, I think through the process, everyone in the group felt ownership. In January and March of 2017, the Skokie Cares group hosted 2 community conversations. And what was interesting, I think, about that was, we very much followed some of the format of our Harwood conversations, but we worked and shared our knowledge with our partners and worked together in hosting and facilitating those conversations. And at those conversations, it was really a forum for people in the community to connect, to share, and at the same time, Skokie Cares shared information about the lawn sign campaign and enlisted others to join us. Next slide. So people were really excited about the signs. I think it was because it was a very tangible way that they could do something. Many people grabbed multiple signs for their neighbors and their friends. And in all, 3,000 signs were distributed through the library, the schools, businesses, the village, and other locations. And in addition to 7,000 buttons that had the same message. So it was really visible. The signs were everywhere on lawns, in windows, in businesses. And you can still see a year and a half later, Skokie welcomes everyone signs when you drive around the community. It was quite a statement. And at the same time, we heard from people that they felt comforted to see that message affirmed. And even since then, when people move into Skokie, we have heard them say that they noticed the signs when they were looking for a place to move, and it was an encouragement to come here. So, and people still ask for the buttons. They are very rare to find. So next slide. After the success of the Skokie Welcomes Everyone campaign, Skokie Cares, we were trying to figure out what was next. And the conversations, and through what we heard from others, the conversations were really leaning towards leadership development, because we recognized that the formal leadership in Skokie is not quite as diverse at all as the community overall. But then through the discussion, we recognized, or a few people really kind of pointed out, that despite our shared aspiration, there is still work to be done around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And through our community conversations, we realized that not everyone feels like they belong, that they are connected, and that there's a real longing for that. So we have a couple of superintendents at the table in Skokie Cares, and they had implemented the national SEED model, Seeking Equity and Educational Diversity. And they thought that it was flexible enough to be able to offer that beyond an educational setting to the community. So we, and when I say we now, I'm talking about Skokie Cares, we decided to conduct, Skokie Cares decided to conduct SEED training that would be open to the public, and plan to do one of those cohorts at the library, and then the elementary school that was already planning to do SEED decided to open up beyond their faculty to community members as well. And the library sent someone to facilitator training, and then Skokie Cares, kind of looking forward, applied for a grant from our local foundation to be able to send someone else from the community to facilitator training as well. Next slide. So this is kind of a graphic of where we've been since last year with the two SEED cohorts, one at the library, one at the elementary school. And for some people, that experience has been reported as life-changing. Skokie Cares was successful in getting that grant, and so from the original cohorts, we selected a participant to attend national training, and that has increased our capacity to do more cohorts, which then started this fall. So now we're offering one at the library, one at a park district location, and again, another one at an elementary school. And you know, with that experience under our belts, the Skokie Cares members were really energized, more organized, and recruited nearly 100 people. So there were like 40 people in the two last year, and almost 100 in the 3 this year. And then in addition to that, there were people who had participated in training that wanted more, that really now want to figure out ways that they can actually intentionally live out what they've learned. So the library and the high school district are organizing what we're calling SEED in Action, which is kind of a 2.0. And we're offering that under, like, though, you know, we're kind of the organizers, we're offering that under the Skokie Cares umbrella. And we're hoping that that will have an impact on organizational and community systems. And now, 2 years since that first meeting, we are just about ready to start some visioning about what comes next. So next, I think stepping back, we can really see an evolution. And, you know, I can look back and, even though I wasn't there at the time, know that some of our very first community conversations that we had 3 years ago are bearing fruit. We are working more on issues that the community has identified as important, rather than like looking at specific audiences. And once we are involved, we are sharing our resources as a partnership, and, you know, sharing the billing for that. We're spending a lot of time on working on more complex initiatives with multiple partners, and recognizing that, rather than that one, you know, library with individuals together, that really that's the way that we're going to impact the community. And I think as a result, things are really happening in Skokie. People who have attended SEED are sharing experiences, they are building common understanding, and making common commitments to more equity. And there's a lot of cross-fertilization that's happening now as well. And I think the Skokie Cares experiences are kind of having an impact throughout the community in other places and other projects as well. And last slide. I just was going to end by saying that, you know, in some ways I feel like I was born to do this work, but at the same time, really getting out there is different. I'm learning every day, and I know that we're going to have some time to talk together, so I can share a little bit more about what that's meant and how it's changed my work as well when we get to that point.
Great, thank you very much. That was really inspiring, and it was making me think about Amanda's earlier comment that it's not your grandmother's library anymore. And I'm just curious real quickly if you would comment on, you know, how do people see the library in the community as opposed to maybe how they might have seen it in the past? What space does it occupy in people's lives, do you think, now?
We have a lot, and I think a lot of libraries do, have a lot of community support. I think what we're hearing is because community engagement is one of 3 core values that, you know, are part of our strategic plan, as well as equity, diversity, and inclusion. And people do see the library, and they see, and they all come through the library. So that's the way it looks when you come in the library as well. I think it is maybe a little bit of a shift for others to see us as a convener, but they're asking us now to do that. You know, seeing us as that in-between facilitator role. I don't know if, you know, the normal person on the street does, but they know that they could get their Skokie welcomes everyone signs at the library.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And if I could ask you, there's a question in chat about how to get more information on the seed program.
Oh,
so
yeah,
maybe,
I'm sure.
Maybe you could respond to that.
Yeah, they have a website themselves, and a lot of information there, and some videos and things like that. So you can, or you can contact me.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, so let's move on to our last speaker here. And this is Estella from Altadena Library District in California, who I've had the pleasure of working with for the last couple of years. And she's got some great story as well to share. Let's see, is she there? Yes, there we go.
Camera here, sorry about that. So Altadena is just north of Pasadena. We are part of the Los Angeles County. However, we are not part of the Los Angeles Public Library System, nor are we part of the LA County Library System. We are our own independent district. And because of that, we sometimes struggle with a little bit of an identity crisis. So participating in Harwood in the community conversations has become a great way for the community to get to know us. Being part of the greater Los Angeles County, sometimes people will come to us with their Pasadena library card and say, oh, I want to check out a book and here's my library card. And we have to say to them, we're Altadena, we're our own district, we're not part of another library system. And so a couple of years ago, we were fortunate to be one of the libraries that participated in the first cohort of the California State Library initiative to turn outwards and engage the community through community conversations. And what we did to start our process is we had a small group of staff that were our community conversations committee. And then we also had the fortune to be able to hire a facilitator, Brian Beery, who is well known in the community. So he actually would lead each of our conversations. And then we were also fortunate to hire a person who took our notes for us. So that enabled our community conversations committee, when we actually had community conversations, to just actually be able to sit and listen and hear the feedback that the community was giving us. With our community conversations, I think we had about 23 to 25 in all. I might also add that we do have one branch along with our main location. And at our branch, we actually had a community conversation in Spanish. And so one of the great outcomes of that community conversation was that we heard that, well, why are all of your story times only in English? Why aren't there any story times in Spanish? So one of the great results of that community conversation is that we were able to listen to the needs of the community. We were able to hear what they were asking for, and we created now bilingual story times. And the wonderful thing about the bilingual story times that were a result of the community conversation is that not only do our native Spanish speakers come to these bilingual story times, but we also get native English speakers who want to teach their children Spanish and who want to engage with their community in a different way. So that's been one of the great things that resulted out of the community conversations that we had here in Altadena. I also would like to share another really awesome story that resulted out of our community conversations. And that is, once we held all the community conversations, we developed a community report to give the results of that. And then we had what we called a town hall. And the town hall was attended by more than 100 people. It was great attendance. And what we did that night is we had various tables set up, and the tables had signage saying, okay, if you're interested in education, you're going to sit here. If you're interested in government, you're going to sit at this table. And one of the tables we had was about mobility. Now, each of these tables subjects were based upon what were the results of the community conversation. Within the various community conversations, we kept hearing certain things that the community was telling us. They were saying, oh, we don't know who our town council is. We don't know how to talk to our local government. We have problems with our educational system. So there were some common threads that came out of our community conversations. And at the town hall, we wanted to address these common threads. And the goal of the town hall was not only to address the common threads, but then to ask the community, okay, this is what you've identified as your concern. Now what are you going to do? How are you going to engage in correcting this situation? So one of the subjects was mobility. I sat at the mobility table as the community conversations representative and led the discussion of the people who were interested in mobility. And one of the people that sat at this table was a woman named Dorothy. And Dorothy is an avid bicyclist, and one of her concerns was that here in Altadena, there was some concerns about safety. We don't have sidewalks, and maybe the signage for bicyclists isn't great. So out of this community conversation, Dorothy decided that she was going to work on mobility as part of her concern for the community. And not only was she going to work on mobility, she decided to run for the town council. She was elected, and now her platform as a town council member is actually working on mobility, which arose out of the community conversations. And so she created what's called the Safe Streets Committee. One of our library staff is on this committee. And one of the great things that they recently did is about a month ago at our branch location, bringing this whole aspect of community engagement back into the library. We opened up our branch on a Sunday, which is normally closed. We had an all-day event at the library. We closed off our parking lot. We set up cones in the parking lot so that children could learn proper safety rules, proper safety signage. And it was just a great day. We had our friends of the library set up a pop-up book sale. And this was just one of these things that came out of the community conversations by this woman who attended the community conversations, got motivated. She got motivated enough to run for town council so that she could then make a difference in our community. She now has the Safe Streets Committee, and she brought it back to the library by having this all-day event. So that's just one story that I'm quickly sharing with you all about a great success that we've had here in Altadena.
Great, thank you very much.
So one of the things that is not uncommon, and maybe you have some other stories of this, is through the process of allowing people to engage just authentically in these conversations around the kind of community they want, they sort of self-identify things that they can do, and they tend to step up. And the council person there is one of the people that's a good story of that person. I'm just curious, have you seen any other things like that where just engaging the community in this way causes people to step up and say, what can I do? And they begin to be part of it?
Sure. Another example we have is there used to be an open mic night here in the community, and we had a community member who said, you know what? What's happened to open mic? The place where they used to hold the open mic, I guess, was no longer available. And so we had a couple of community members come to us and say, hey, you know, can we hold an open mic here at the library on Tuesday nights? And we said, sure. And so now we have a very successful open mic on Tuesday nights, and it runs itself. We don't need a library staff person to monitor it. The community just comes in, they set their equipment, and off they go.
And so it sort of reminds me of a result that Amanda is seeing with mentors, and that Amber is seeing with the park. People sort of just take those things on.
Yeah, they become, as it was said, early advocates for what they're passionate about. And
right.
It's the greater good, definitely.
All right, so let's, what I want to do at this point is move on and get all our panelists here together and just have a little conversation around these two questions. Did it require of you personally to choose a different way to see and work in your community? And then what advice would you have for others who seek to grow personal and civic confidence to build a different path forward? And I guess it's basically, what does it require to build this kind of library that's not your grandmother's library anymore? Who wants to kick this off?
I can do that if you would like me to. For me personally, it's taken a lot of personal growth on my part. I made a lot of mistakes when I was younger, and I relied heavily on the community support that I've had to bring me to who I am today, in all honesty. So I've had to be very brave and accept that you know, I can do this, that I'm capable of this. And that's why I believe so much in the mentoring program, because I have seen the impact that a community can have on an individual because it's been me. So I'm sure all of you have heard that whole phrase before, be who you needed when you were younger. And that's my takeaway. That's my personal mantra. That's what I want to be. So that's mine.
I think part of it is, Carlton, you asked me a little bit about how does the community see the library, and, you know, is that different than what it was before? And I think individually we also have to, or what I've had to do, is not go in with preconceived notions about what our role might be in a particular project. You know what our assets are, know what we have available, but not just make have an expectation about what role we might play. And similarly, to just let go of ego and know if there are a lot of people at the table, that it's not easy. People have different agendas, but to kind of look for towards the long term. You know, if we're really going to have an impact in community, it's not going to happen all at once. And so focus on process and focus on relationships, and know that they'll just continue to deepen and things will evolve.
I think for me, one of the things that I try to do every day is to remind myself that I need to model this turning outward behavior to all staff. And as I mentioned, that we do have several staff that are on our Community Conversations Committee. However, we also have new staff, and it's a matter of remembering to engage new staff and teaching them about the Harwood practice and letting them know the history of what we've done here the last couple of years of turning outward, and how we really want to get away from being, you know, as it's been said, your grandmother's library, to really it's the people's library. So just modeling, for me, modeling behavior on a daily basis.
I would also, I guess what I would add, because I agree with all of the things said, I'm an extrovert in a land of introverts. And so the idea of going out and hosting conversations and talking to strangers is not in any way intimidating. So probably personally, one of the biggest things I had to work on though was listening, because I'm more of a fixer. And as soon as somebody starts telling me about a problem, I'm already trying to fix it instead of trying to listen. And I've gotten much better at it. And it's something, one of the other original cohort people, Erica Freudenberger over in New York, she's an introvert. And she and I have argued, well, who's better at this kind of work? But really, we just have different strengths and different weaknesses. And the introverts were better listeners on day one than I was.
I'll just kind of jump in there too, Amber, with this, like as soon as someone raises an issue and your mind is going with how to fix the problem. And I recently had a community, partner call about an issue, and about something they wanted to change on an upcoming project. And I was fully ready to say, well, we can't do that. And instead I just stopped and I said, can you just tell me a little bit more about what your concern is, so I can better understand? And ultimately, we didn't do what that person wanted to do, but I came up with something else, or we came up with something else that made sense together. And so some of this, I think, also just builds on the skills that we all already have. I mean, to me, I think that builds on, good reference skills, instead of just assuming that the question that you get is the question verbatim. To step back and learn and better understand what the person wants. And I think there are many examples of how this work does build on the skills that good librarians already have. And that would be one of my pieces of advice, that you already have what it takes.
Mm-hmm.
I treat it like a reference interview. Somebody has an ask, but is it really the question? Yeah. The other part of that I would add though is the confidence. You really do have a spot at the table, and you really do have a spot in the community. And as a person in a larger organization who's trying to rally people around this idea, to remember to treat it with enthusiasm and be positive about the change, and champion it in a way that's believable, so that people want to get on the bus with you.
Mm-hmm. And knowing that just having the conversation and letting people talk about things that are important to them, that already makes a difference. I mean, the conversations are so incredibly bonding, I think, and people are so open, and that is something that, kindness is free, being together, and it's just really a magical time.
A couple of things sort of jump out in your discussion here for me, and that's that the initial comments around bravery. We quite often run into librarians who are a little hesitant to go out and actually talk to people they don't know, and we often find when we do training with people, when they actually go out and start using some of these simple conversation techniques, like a 5-minute conversation ask exercise. You can do it one-on-one. It's real brief. People come back and say, I can do this, so they gain some sense of confidence that even though they might be part of the 70 or 80% of librarians that are introverts, that they can talk to people they don't know, and it's not going to be scary. But that does take a little bravery for the first time, but it develops confidence, some skills, and they can then move on to a fuller community conversation. And through those conversations, you're exactly like, it's like a reference interview. You're just probing a little deeper to find out what's really going on, so you can better address what their concerns are. Something else that came up in here is about not having preconceived notions. It's amazing what you can learn when you take the time to listen to the community and ask them open-ended questions about what they want. I've been involved in training lots of librarians, and I can't think of an instant where people haven't come back from the conversation with an insight that caused them to shift a little bit what they were doing, so their work would be more effective. The other thing around impact, it's not like you throw a big boulder in a lake and all of a sudden that's impact and it's done. It unfolds over time. You know, the example about people were talking about food scarcity, but they're not talking about that anymore. The same type of thing that you're experiencing around maybe support for people in schools. And, you know, all of a sudden you go from a few mentors to more mentors to, I think you're moving into mentors in the middle school now. Is that right?
Yep.
So you sort of see something good in the community that people can relate to, and, you know, tends to get people on board. And this is what we talk about when we say building a community, a common enterprise again. And, you know, how we hunger for seeing examples of that. Modeling behavior. Yeah, I mean, if you can go about your work in such a way that you demonstrate the behaviors that you're trying to talk about, it's a really good way of getting people on board, because they can see it for real, what it's like. Any other comments about this that you have? I'm going to check real quick in chat. It looks to me like there might be a couple comments here.
There's a few questions, Carlton.
Few questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Have you ever gotten into something and felt like you bit off more than you can chew? How do you keep up the energy it takes to follow through? You ever feel overwhelmed with it? What do you folks think?
Every day.
We call it the capacity conundrum. You know, the part of doing this work well is you become the most popular person at the dance. Everybody wants a spot on your dance card, and you're so used to saying yes and making these things work that you've really got to find the yeses that have the biggest impacts, or the yes and let me help you meet the perfect partner for this endeavor. You know, just better use your resources, that it doesn't always have to be the library doing the thing that needs to be done. But this kind of goes to what you know, Victoria is asking in the chat in regards to larger library systems. When there are already agencies doing the work well in regards to, like, we don't need to be a food bank. We have a food bank. We've got a great food bank. So what can we be that the food bank can't be? And it's that idea of being more of a backbone organization, of helping people meet the other right people. And as for agencies and community conversations, when we hear things that really just don't apply to the library and there are other people doing it well, we report out to the agency that does it well and say, this is what we're hearing. So how can we help spread your information in this area? Because maybe they don't know that you're doing this great work.
Absolutely. And it is overwhelming at times. This has opened so many opportunities for us, and we are invited to tables where we weren't before, but I'm so grateful for that as well, because we've had the same people sitting at the same tables, making a lot of the same decisions. So to be asked to be there and to be part of the voice, I'm very grateful for that. I think it's sometimes really hard work, but I think it's the best work. I feel so fortunate every day that I get here.
I just want to, a little bit off, but just jump in on what Amanda said about seeing some of the same people at the same tables. I feel like it's a movable feast, and, you know, joke with the head of the human services department in the village, because when I see her on a Monday, I'll just say, like, now when else are we going to be seeing each other at whose meeting, you know, this week? And what's happening then is that, you know, we're all better learning each other's work styles and priorities, and are able to make the connections not only between our organizations, but of the different projects. And I think it's all to the good. I think the piece about, you know, being overwhelmed, again, I just keep trying to remind myself that, you know, we're here for the long term. Mm-hmm. So just doing whatever we can on a daily and weekly basis, but it doesn't all have to happen this year. And expectation is really important.
We're definitely, we did get a little overwhelmed there for a while, and we did have to kind of take a step back and think about what are our intentions in engaging with the community. So in terms of even things like programs, where for a while we were trying to do every program under the sun, we had to take a step back and say, okay, this is how many staff people we have, what our budget is. It's okay. We had to tell ourselves it's okay not to do everything, but it's okay to think about the intention of what we're doing instead of just trying to have quantity.
So let me pose a couple questions to you that have showed up in chat. One of them is about partnering and doing some of this work with local college or university libraries. And then the other question, which is a little bit different one, is pushback from administration, city managers, county commissioners. Have you experienced any of that? And what does that look like, and how have you dealt with it?
We have a,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Amber.
Oh, no, go ahead, Nancy. I went first last time.
Okay. Well, I was just going to answer the question about local college or university libraries. We have a local community college in Skokie and have recognized that we need to be doing more. So we've just started that process of just going down the street and meeting with library folks there, seeing what they are doing and in their collections, and then also with them meeting with administration of the community college as well. And there just seem to be lots of potential overlaps. That's the community college is who teaches our ESL and citizenship classes here at the library. There are other things, but we're just at the beginning with the library of the community college. So just starting.
I was going to address pushback from administration. Again, you know, our director started the initiative, so we definitely were on board in leadership team and whatnot. But city managers, city councils, mayors, and all of that, they have not pushed back at all, especially when you report to them. Like, I've been talking to the community, I've been talking to your constituents, and most often they actually want to hear what people are saying, especially if they're an elected official. They like to know what issues the community has, because a lot of times things come up when they're talking to the library that wouldn't come up if they were talking to the mayor.
Any other thoughts on that topic from folks? Either pushback from administration or city managers, or working with college libraries, university libraries?
We don't have a local college here, and we've not dealt with any pushback at all.
All right. Well, one of the things I'll just comment on is we do encounter pushback sometimes, but one of the things that we've found is there's always a way forward. You can always figure out a way to be more turned outward in your work, despite any kind of circumstances that you run into. And that's sort of part and parcel of being a public innovator, is that you sort of sometimes have to recalibrate, rethink, take a different path, but there's always a path that you can take. And it's a lot of this work is about just being on a path of more possibility and hope, and how that works out in the community. So a lot of it is not thinking it through to thinking that you have it all figured out. Sometimes you just have to allow the work to emerge and see, you know, how you can navigate through some of these things of pushback. Quite often what I've seen is that when there's pushback, there's another path forward. That other path forward leads to the pushback to dissipate and go away, because people see the experience, the promise of the work. So with that, let me just move on, if I could, to this next slide, and give you a little bit of a sense of, for those on the webinar here, some options for moving forward. The If you're interested in learning more about Harwood practice or moving forward with it, there's something called Harwood Half Hour. You can tune in to a weekly half hour Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern with Rich, and he's live on Facebook and Instagram and can answer your questions. And tomorrow he'll be discussing about the midterm elections, what that means for our lives and the leadership we need to move forward. Rich also has a national speaking tour where he's going to be traveling around the country talking about finding dignity, hope, and community in America today. And you can connect with Colleen Bowman if that's something that you are interested in bringing to your town or city. C. Bowman at theharwoodinstitute.org is her email address. And the people on the screen that you've had today, you know, they've been through training and they've been through labs. And if you want to participate in a lab or training, we do that both in-person labs. I don't believe the next one is scheduled for librarians right now, but we have a virtual lab that's going to be coming up, I think next spring. And this is basically done asynchronously and synchronously over an 8-week period of time. We've had lots of people from Skokie involved in that, I know, for example. And so you can, if you're interested in that, you could reach out as well and say you're interested in the virtual lab, and we'll get you some information on that. And finally, if there's anybody here from Indiana, I would invite you to contact Michelle Bradley or Pam Seabolt, because they have an open application right now to participate in a lab that we're going to be holding next spring in Indiana. And that's going to be supplemented with a number of months of coaching support as well. So if you're in Indiana, that's something you can look into. And let me see, just one thing in chat here, what I've got. Somebody, Nancy and Amber are agreeing, so that's good.
I'm just answering the other questions, Carlton.
Yeah. At any rate, that is it for the webinar today. I want to give a big thanks to all 4 of these ladies that agreed to participate. I knew they would do a great job because I know a little bit about the work that each of them have been doing. And I'm just grateful we were able to pull this together for you. And then Habiba has a survey that she would like you to complete in terms of how we did for you today. And with that, I will say thank you very much for joining us, and it was good to be with you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.